He knew every customer in his coffee shop, how they sat, how they spoke, what times they came in. But those three men were different. Their behavior, eye movements, the topics they discussed. With 20 years of intelligence experience, Frank knew these three weren't just there for coffee, and his old skills kicked in.
Welcome to Human Stories. Before we begin this thrilling story, tell us in the comments which city you're watching from today. And if you believe stories like this need to be told, hit that subscribe button. These stories must not be forgotten.
Frank Rodriguez owned a small coffee shop on one of the narrow streets in Lower Manhattan, New York. At 56 years old, medium height, graying mustache, always dressed clean, he was a man who commanded quiet respect. His coffee shop was called Old New York Coffee and had been serving the same location for 10 years. He opened at 7 a.m. and closed at 10 p.m. His customers were mostly neighborhood residents, retirees, small business owners, students, office workers. Everyone called him Frank. His coffee shop was small but warm. 12 tables, vintage wooden chairs, photos of New York's historic landmarks hung on the walls. The Brooklyn Bridge, the Statue of Liberty, Central Park scenes. His counter always had fresh bagels, pastries, and sandwiches. There was a small TV, but it usually stayed muted. Customers preferred conversation. Most importantly, Frank's brewed coffee and tea were legendary. Frank's got the magic touch, customers would say. His coffee hits different. The atmosphere of his coffee shop was incredibly welcoming. Morning hours brought retirees who'd read their newspapers and discussed current events. Lunch hours brought nearby shop owners taking breaks. Evenings brought young people and students who'd study or chat. Frank treated everyone with the same warmth, considering them all family. But Frank's real talent was knowing his customers. He knew each person's habits, where they'd sit, what they'd drink, their conversation style, even their moods. Mr. Thompson came every morning at 8, sat at the corner table, drank his coffee with 2 sugars. He'd put on his reading glasses while reading the paper, turning pages slowly. Sarah, the teacher, came afternoons, graded student papers, drank black coffee. On stressful days, she'd finish her coffee faster. Mrs. Chen came evenings with friends, had long conversations, drank herbal tea. On happy days, she'd laugh and talk more. This observational ability wasn't coincidence. Frank's skill was a remnant of his old profession. Because Frank Rodriguez had served as an intelligence officer with the CIA from 1985 to 2005. For 20 years, he'd participated in the most sensitive operations, helped prevent countless terrorist attacks, and worked for national security, foreign intelligence, domestic security, counterterrorism. He'd served in every CIA department and risen to senior levels. Nobody knew about his CIA service. He was extremely secretive about it. When he opened the coffee shop after retirement, when neighbors asked about his work, he'd simply say, "My old job was classified. I worked for the government." Neighbors didn't press further. Being reliable, honest, and hard-working was enough. Nobody could even guess the truth. In reality, Frank's CIA career had been quite distinguished. His first assignments were near the Soviet border, collecting critical intelligence during the Cold War. Later, he'd participated in operations against Al-Qaeda and other terrorist organizations. In the 1990s, he'd played an important role in identifying sleeper cells in New York, helping capture dozens of terrorists. In his final years, he'd moved to the International Terrorism Division, tracking groups with ISIS connections. His decision to retire early was due to his wife's illness. Maria had developed cancer and the treatment process was difficult. Frank had requested early retirement to spend more time with his family. Unfortunately, after losing his wife, he'd been left alone, but he'd tried to hold on to life by opening the coffee shop. That Wednesday morning, everything was normal. Frank had opened his coffee shop, done the cleaning, brewed his coffee. The old espresso machine was humming. The aroma of fresh coffee filled the shop. The first customers were starting to arrive. Mr. Thompson had arrived on time, settled into his corner. A few business owners had also stopped by for their morning break. At 9:30 a.m., 3 men entered together. Frank had never seen them before. New customers were always welcome. "Welcome," Frank said with a smile. The 3 men thanked him and sat at the corner table. The 3 men looked normal at first glance, ages 25-30, well-dressed. One was bearded and tall, wearing an expensive watch. Another had a mustache and was medium height, wearing a dark jacket. The third looked younger, dressed casually. They ordered coffee and began talking. But Frank's 20 years of intelligence experience told him something else. The first thing he noticed was that all 3 were constantly looking around. They were monitoring the door, watching other customers, scanning the windows. This wasn't normal customer behavior. Normal people relax when they come to a coffee shop. They don't examine their surroundings so carefully. The second thing he noticed was their conversation style. They kept their voices low, specifically being careful that other customers couldn't hear. Moreover, they were constantly using vague expressions as if they were coding. They asked unclear questions like, "Is that thing ready? Is the preparation complete?" The third thing he noticed was their relationship with each other. Despite arriving together, they were acting distant toward each other. They were speaking formally as if they didn't know each other well, but at the same time, they had a closeness that suggested they were discussing very secret matters. This contradiction was an important signal for Frank. Frank began listening more carefully while serving coffee. His 20 years of intelligence experience automatically kicked in. The listening techniques he'd learned at the CIA, body language analysis, suspicious behavior detection, all of it was now active. "Is tonight ready?" asked the bearded one, lowering his voice even more. "Yes, everything's as planned," said the mustached one. "Only timing matters, we can't be late," said the youngest. These kinds of vague but urgent conversations were setting off Frank's alarm bells. He'd heard similar conversations frequently during his CIA years. At 10 a.m., after other customers left, the three men began speaking more freely. Only Mr. Thompson remained in the coffee shop, absorbed in his newspaper, not paying much attention to his surroundings. Frank continued listening from behind the counter without being obvious. "Tomorrow night at 8 p.m., said the bearded one, turning his coffee cup. "Location is confirmed," said the mustached one, tapping the table. "Only we should know the place. Nobody else should approach there," said the youngest, looking around. Frank's pulse quickened. This conversation style was identical to terrorist organization members' conversation style he'd encountered for years. Vague expressions, specific time setting, secret location determination, these were definitely not innocent chat topics. He began listening even more carefully. Pretending to wash dishes, he opened his ears more. "Is the material ready?" asked the bearded one. "The bag is ready. I checked," said the mustached one. "Nothing's missing inside," the youngest checked. "No, everything's there." These words were very familiar to Frank. During his CIA years, material and bag codes were frequently used in terrorist operations. Especially in explosive material and weapon smuggling, these terms were standard. Now his suspicion had turned to certainty. "What about police checks?" asked one. "Routine, no problem," said another. "No patrols at those hours anyway," said the third. This showed they'd researched police patrol schedules. Normal citizens wouldn't know police patrols in such detail. "It won't be crowded, will it?" asked the youngest anxiously. "No, those places are empty at that hour," said the bearded one. "There won't be innocent people who could get hurt," said the mustached one. This sentence worried Frank even more. The phrase "innocent people who could get hurt" clearly indicated the existence of an attack plan. At 10:30 a.m., all three got up. They were careful even when paying. They didn't take change, wanting to leave quickly, but they acted professionally even while leaving. First, the bearded one left, checking the surroundings. After waiting 2 minutes, the mustached one left. Then after waiting 3 minutes, the youngest left. This was definitely a professional security procedure. Frank watched them from the coffee shop window. All three walked in different directions, acting as if they didn't know each other. But Frank's experienced eye knew this was also a security measure. Frank was very thoughtful for the rest of that day. Even while serving customers, his mind was on those three men. These three people were definitely suspicious, but he needed to be sure. Maybe he was being too paranoid because he'd done intelligence work for years. Sometimes old habits showed themselves in retirement. But that evening, when he closed the coffee shop and went home, the more he thought about it, the more certain he became. His 20 years of experience wasn't telling him he was wrong. These three men's behavior, conversations, movements, security measures, everything pointed to suspicious operation preparation. He couldn't sleep that night. He looked at his late wife Maria's photo. "Maria, what should I do?" he asked quietly. "I'm retired, but my conscience isn't clear. These men seem to be preparing to do something bad." He thought until morning. If his guess was correct, innocent people could be harmed somewhere very soon. He might be retired, but his sense of patriotism had never ended. His desire to serve his country still lived within him. The next day at 9 a.m., the same three men came again. This time, Frank was much more careful. He watched them while preparing coffee. Same table, same seating arrangement. But this time, they looked more tense. "Is it tonight?" asked one, moving his fingers across the table. "Yes, exactly at 8 p.m., said another definitively. "Afterwards, the meeting point will change. Plan B will activate," said the third. Frank was now 100% certain this was definitely an operation plan. "Let's check one last time," said the bearded one. "Bag, ready. Vehicle, waiting. Exit route, clear." This systematic checklist was identical to terrorist organization operation preparations Frank had seen at the CIA. Even worse, he heard, "Police won't pass at that time. We know the route." This showed they knew not only police patrol times, but also routes. Security cameras? Handled? This level of professionalism worried Frank greatly. That afternoon, he'd made his decision. He needed to use his old connections. He had colleagues from his CIA days. Some must still be active. At 3 p.m., he took a break and called his old colleague, Kevin. Kevin Walsh still worked at the CIA and held a senior position. After a 2-minute phone conversation, they arranged a meeting. "Kevin, it's Frank. I need to see you. It's urgent." "Frank, what's up? Is everything okay?" "It's okay, but there's a very serious situation. Can we meet?" "Of course, I'm leaving now." "Where?" "Our old place, in an hour." Their old place was a historic tea garden in Central Park. They'd held secret meetings there for years. He took the subway to Central Park and waited for Kevin. Kevin arrived 45 minutes later. He looked unchanged, just his hair was a bit grayer. "Frank, good to see you, but I can tell from your voice something serious is up." "What happened?" he said. Frank told the situation from beginning to end. The 3 suspicious men, their conversations, their behavior, security measures, his suspicions. Kevin listened carefully and became increasingly serious. "Frank, are you sure? This is a very serious allegation. You've been retired for 20 years, Kevin said. "Kevin, you know me. We worked together for 20 years. You know my instincts, my analytical ability. These men are definitely suspicious, and they're acting in a very professional manner. If you're right, this could be a very big incident." "Tell me the details again," Kevin said, taking out his notebook. Frank retold all the details, the words they used, behavior patterns, security procedures. "Okay, Frank, we'll act immediately. Can you photograph these men? They'll probably come tomorrow. I'll take pictures." "Good, I'll also start background research. These types of operations are usually part of larger networks." When Kevin left, he touched Frank's shoulder. "Frank, you haven't changed at all. You still worry about your country. This behavior is very valuable. Retirement doesn't end patriotism, Kevin. Every citizen of this country has responsibility." The next day, Frank was much more careful. He prepared a small camera in his pocket, kept his phone's voice recording app open to record conversations. The 3 men came at the same time as previous days. This time they were more tense and rushed. "Tonight for sure," he heard clearly. "We start at 8 p.m., no delays," said another. "Final preparations complete, no turning back now," said the third. Frank carefully photographed all 3. He recorded important parts of their conversations. "Target clear, plan set," he heard them say. "Tonight we start making history," said the bearded one excitedly. That evening, Kevin called. "Frank, we researched these men. We're identifying some of them. They really are suspicious persons. Some have been detained before, then released. You say they're doing an operation tonight, right?" "Yes, Kevin, definitely. At 8 p.m. somewhere, probably at a location that's not crowded." "Okay, our special teams are standing by. Our surveillance system is active. You stay home, don't put yourself in danger." But Frank didn't think so. He'd served his country for 20 years. Now he felt the same duty continuing. He wanted to see the end of this operation. At 7:30 p.m., the 3 men came to the coffee shop one last time. This time they didn't chat at all. "Final check," one said briefly. "Everything ready," said another. "Our time has come, let's go," said the third. Frank immediately called Kevin. "They left, they're moving, they look very determined." "Okay, Frank, our surveillance system is active, stay away, leave it to the professionals." But Frank couldn't resist. 20 years of occupational hazard, curiosity, and sense of responsibility drove him to follow from a distance. The 3 men moved toward the Brooklyn Bridge direction. Frank also watched from a safe distance. At 8 p.m., the 3 men stopped at a large parking lot near the bridge. They took large bags from their cars. Frank couldn't see exactly what was in them from afar, but the bags were clearly heavy. From their movements and careful carrying style, it was obvious they contained dangerous materials. Right then, CIA Special Operations teams kicked into action. Multiple civilian vehicles suddenly appeared. The 3 men were professionally surrounded and taken into custody without resistance. Large amounts of explosive material, electronic detonators, and bomb-making components were found in their bags. Later, he learned that the three terrorists had planned to carry out a large-scale attack on the Brooklyn Bridge. They were going to place explosives on the bridge in the evening hours and detonate them at night. If they'd succeeded, both the bridge would be damaged and many innocent people could have been injured. The operation was completed completely successfully. 3 terrorists were captured. A major attack was prevented. City and national security were protected. But most importantly, countless innocent lives were saved. Kevin called Frank early the next morning. "Frank, well done, brother. Thanks to you, we prevented a major disaster. These men really were planning a large-scale attack on the bridge. If you hadn't noticed, very bad things could have happened." "My duty, Kevin," Frank said humbly. "I may be retired, but my patriotism has never ended. Serving this country is an honor for me. The country owes you gratitude. If you want, you could return to the old job as a consultant." "No, Kevin, I'm happy at my coffee shop, but I'm always ready when needed." The next week, the coffee shop returned to normal routine. Customers came and went. Frank served coffee and tea, had warm conversations, but now he was much more careful. He analyzed every new customer, noted suspicious behaviors, followed abnormal situations. A month later, the incident made local newspapers. Headlines read, "Major terror attack prevented thanks to citizen tip," but Frank's real identity and CIA background were kept secret for security reasons. He was only mentioned as an alert citizen in the news. Neighborhood residents began saying, "Frank is such a patriot, such a careful person. Thank God we have such conscious citizens," they'd say, but nobody still knew his real identity. His CIA background remained a state secret. Frank was also pleased with this situation. He was already a person who loved secrecy. What mattered was serving his country. He didn't need fame or recognition for that. Today, Frank still works at the same coffee shop. He serves his customers with the same warmth, provides the same quality coffee and tea service. But at the same time, he continues to observe and analyze his surroundings, because he knows that retirement doesn't end patriotic feelings. Sometimes young customers ask him curiously, "Frank, how did you notice that terror incident? You're very observant." "You have to pay attention, kid," Frank says with a smile. "Learning to read people, distinguishing normal from abnormal is important. As citizens, we all have responsibility." "But you notice different things than normal people?" "They sometimes insist." "Experience," Frank says. "Life teaches a person many things. What's important is using what you've learned in the right place." A year later, Frank experienced another incident. This time it was a different group, but again they were displaying suspicious behavior. 2 people constantly making phone calls, sending encrypted messages. Frank's attention was caught again, and he called Kevin. This time he was also right. It was a gang running a counterfeit money operation. "Frank, you're a real treasure," Kevin said after that incident. "Maybe you should officially consider consulting." "Kevin, my place is here, but I'll do whatever's needed for my country." After these incidents, Frank's reputation in the neighborhood increased even more. Of course, nobody knew his real story, but he was known as a very careful and patriotic citizen. Young people coming to his coffee shop started consulting him. "Frank, how should we be careful in life?" they'd ask. He'd give them life lessons. "Kids, life is a school. Learn to read people. Learn normal behaviors so you can notice abnormal ones. But most importantly, love your country. This nation belongs to all of us. Protecting it is all our duty." "But Frank, how do you know so many things?" they'd ask, to which he'd smile and answer, "Reading, observing, gaining experience, taking advantage of the opportunities life offers us." Sometimes old CIA colleagues would visit Frank. Of course, the neighborhood didn't know this, but Kevin and other former colleagues would stop by occasionally. "Frank, we miss you," they'd say. "We need experienced people like you." "I'm here," Frank would say, "always ready to help when needed." During these visits, they'd discuss current situations. Frank's views were still very valuable. His street-level observations, taking the pulse of the people, were very important for the CIA. "What's happening on the streets, Frank?" they'd ask. "What are people thinking? What topics are on the agenda?" Frank would share his observations. What he heard from people coming to his coffee shop, their concerns, expectations. One day, Kevin came with a special request. "Frank, would you give training seminars for our young agents on street-level observation, suspicious behavior detection?" Frank thought about it. "Will it stay secret?" "Of course, only trusted personnel. Then it's possible." So Frank began giving training to young agents at the CIA once a month. He shared his coffee shop experiences, observation techniques, analysis methods. "Look, young people," he'd say in training sessions, Intelligence isn't just technology. The human element is very important. Learn to read people. Know normal behavior patterns so you can notice abnormal ones. But Frank, how do you gather information in the coffee shop without making anyone suspicious? They'd ask. Acting natural. I really became a coffee shop owner. This isn't a cover, it's real. But at the same time, I use my eyes. People show their true selves where they're comfortable. These training sessions were very successful. Young agents learned a lot from Frank's experiences. They became more careful, more analytical in the field. Frank's influence continued not only in the intelligence community, but also in the neighborhood. He was an example to young people. He was known for his hard work, honesty, and patriotism. I want to be like Frank, some would say. He's so knowledgeable, so careful, such a patriot. They also consulted him about security matters in the neighborhood. Frank, what should we do for our children's safety? Keep neighborhood relationships strong, he'd say. Know each other. Notice abnormal situations. Security isn't just police work, it's all our duty. Thus, Frank not only secured his own coffee shop, but raised awareness about security throughout the neighborhood. People began to be more careful, to observe their surroundings. In daily life, the shopkeepers, retirees, ordinary people we encounter, perhaps among them are heroes who have served their country greatly. Their identities just remain secret. People like Frank continue to serve their countries even after retirement. Sometimes in a coffee shop, sometimes in a store, sometimes on the street, they keep their eyes open, protect their countries. This story shows that patriotism is not a profession, it's a feeling. Retirement doesn't end this feeling. True patriots are on duty for life. Have you ever met someone like Frank? Someone who appears ordinary but actually performed very important duties. Someone who made great sacrifices for their country but kept it secret. Share their stories in the comments. If you believe stories like this need to be told, don't forget to subscribe. At Human Stories, we don't forget real heroes. Even if they don't seek fame, even if they don't want recognition, we will remember them. And remember, at the coffee shop you visit, the tea garden, the restaurant, the store, perhaps the person serving you is a hidden hero who made great sacrifices for the country. Showing respect to everyone is always the right thing to do. Because real heroes are sometimes found in the most ordinary places, in the most humble jobs. Recognizing them, valuing them is all our duty.